welcome to the Drawing Room Experts. This is Zabe, and with me I have for yet another episode, Zain. क्या हाल है?
ठीक था, what's going on? It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while actually. क्योंकि we have had a few weeks of constant work in barrage and इतना सब
Yeah,
कुछ हो रहा है
pretty
एक
much the
साथ
same.
और अब ये है कि I have a travel coming up.
Yeah.
तो वो उस हिसाब से भी settling करनी पड़ रही है लेकिन it's been busy, but that hasn't stopped us, from engaging in quite sometimes aggressive arguments on WhatsApp. तो मैंने सोचा कि उस arguments को which I found was a very important discussion to
Yeah.
have. और उसका थोड़ा सा background मैं दे देता हूँ for anyone who's listening. A few weeks ago, actually, it was a aftermath of the Met Gala that we were discussing. We were talking about Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, AOC, more commonly known here in the US, uh, Congresswoman from Brooklyn, I think,
I
New
think so.
York. And she famously appeared at the Met Gala, and it was a huge controversy. Oh, actually, that and then also followed by the present vote. I think that was the one that triggered our conversation. The present
Right.
vote to renew, actually not
The
even renew, to
provide funding for the
continue,
Iron Dome, I believe. That's what it
yeah,
was.
to continue funding for the over to continue funding for the already funded, 100% funded Iron Dome in Israel. And
Which is a
she,
missile protection technology.
yeah, I'm sure
Basic.
everyone
Yeah. Yeah.
knows about that, but yeah, it's a missile protection technology that the Israelis built for themselves, and obviously the United States, being their closest ally, have been funding that for time immemorial. It appears. तो उसका वोट हुआ था कांग्रेस के अंदर, and AOC famously, who had called out people for voting present in the past, most commonly, I think, most
Yes.
famously, what's her name, yeah, वो जो presidential candidate भी थी, Indian background की.
Elizabeth Warren.
No, Indian background, like
Oh,
actual
you mean
Indian, not
sorry, Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard.
तुलसी कपाड़, yes.
Yes.
तो उसको उसने कॉल आउट किया था, like in I think last year's or a couple of years
I,
ago,
I got
when
confused because of the whole Native American
हाँ वो मुझे
controversy
पता है वो
around
इंडियन वो,
Elizabeth
I know
Warren.
ना,
That was an
हाँ,
own goal on her part, but that's another topic. Anyways.
exactly. Elizabeth Warren is 1/6 Indian apparently, but
Yeah. Was it 124th or 16? Was
one
it
six,
some
yeah, something like that.
ridiculous number? Anyways, yeah.
Ridiculous number, exactly. So apparently she's a minority, but anyway, but though she had called out a few years ago, AOC had called out Tulsi Gabbard on voting present, and she famously said that it's a cowardly decision for anyone to
Yes.
do that. And then a couple of years later, of course, karma strikes and she votes present on a very sensitive bill, um, for which normally you would expect her to vote no. But
Yep.
she did that, and that started our conversation between me and Zen on our WhatsApp group.
Mm.
And I think what really came out of it was the bigger discussion around political neutrality that I wanted to talk to you about, Zen. Um, First of all, I think let's start with the definition, right? और ये मैंने, by the way, Zarar, who's the journalist from Pakistan, when I did the episode with him, I asked him about political neutrality.
Famously centrist, if I remember.
Famously centrist, Amir centrist, who
Yeah.
he refers to himself as Amir
Right.
centrist.
Right.
Um, so I basically asked him about that. I was like, what is a centrist and what is a neutral in political terms? Like, is there anything such as neutral, or is it just the coward's position to not really go public with your own views and just say, oh, I'm gonna stay neutral? तो तुम्हारे लिहाज से, is there anything like political neutrality that exists?
I. It's like saying was Switzerland really neutral in World War II, because by being neutral you're actually picking a side as well in many respects, I think. So I I'm a little conflicted when I'm talking when I think about neutrality. I a part of me that I think is the dominant part. So ख्याल ये है कि I don't think there is anything such as neutrality. You have opinions, and sometimes your opinion form a subset of larger base, and you might align yourself with that group of people. But that doesn't mean you're in that camp on every issue, right?
Right.
So I that the if you are new if you're neutral, that means you have no opinion on any issue whatsoever, and that's I think
Exactly. Exactly.
impossible being a human being, because human beings are they're opinionated. I think it's just a natural tendency, right? We're not
Mhm.
robots.
Right.
But I think neutrality is not as much of a problem, because I don't mind if someone's not neutral. I think people should be opinionated, and people should have strong convictions. But the problem starts when people have inconsistencies and biases, and they let those creep in, uh, depending on what the situation is. I think that's the bigger issue. If you're consistent across the board that this is my position and I'm going to hold that position irrespective of who it is against, then not only is that acceptable, but that's admirable. But if you flip flop based on whoever, let's say, is in power, if it's your side or the other, and you stay quiet or be present when that happens, that basically leads to another conversation around, if there's even such a thing as being an objective but opinionated person, then it's just all partisan, right?
Yeah, I think Mira be similar opinion. I think my personally, I think neutrality is in this context makes no sense. It's bullshit,
I think it's a
right?
it's a cop out in many
It's a
respects
cop
when you're
out.
saying
It
I'm
is
neutral.
as simple as that. It's a cop out because I think people confuse. I think the key word that you used was bias, right? People confuse um, lack of bias or being very balanced with neutral, right? For example, a journalist. तो मैंने इसी context में ज़रा खोड़ों से पूछा था कि what is the job of a journalist? Is it the job of a journalist to be neutral, or is the job of the journalist to be balanced in in their line of questions, right? So neutral is basically कि मेरे सामने for lack of a better example that comes to my head, मेरे सामने Jews बैठे हुए हैं और
Hmm.
मेरे सामने हिटलर बैठा हुआ है,
Right.
and I'm being neutral and I'm asking them both questions, ठीक है?
That's just like the Switzerland position almost, right? During World
Exactly,
War II,
exactly.
right?
So that that in my opinion is neutral, and if whatever your reaction to that example is exactly what my reaction would be as well. Like, come on, you have
Yeah.
a murderer, a mass murderer on one side, and you have the
Right.
affected or impacted people on the other side. You can't be neutral in those instances.
Right.
Similarly, and it's not just the matter of morality or ethics, but इससे मजीद आगे भी जाता है. सिर्फ कातिल और मकतूल की बात नहीं हो रही यहाँ पर, और भी चीज़ें होती हैं, जैसे कि famously, I like मेरा opinion ये है पाकिस्तान से related, for example, कि there is absolutely no comparison between Imran Khan, Nawaz Sharif, and Zardari. Like, I can't
Mhm.
for one second even whatever my disagreements with Imran Khan is, I can't compare him to those two. Like, he's
No.
not a known corrupt. He's not someone who has robbed the public. He's not someone who has, despite ruling, being part of the ruling elite for of that country for decades, hasn't done anything. Still goes out of the country to get himself treated. Like, he's not living in privilege from that perspective. And plus, तो people when they start comparing those, मुझे थोड़ा सा उस पर हटती है. मैं कहता हूँ नहीं नहीं, you have to look at Imran Khan in isolation or criticize him in isolation. You cannot bring in the likes of, let's say, I don't know, Bernie Madoff, for example, known corrupt person, or Jeffrey Epstein, right? All of these guys, and then start comparing them to your common thief जिसने कोई bread वो करी थी, चुराई थी, या some
Hmm.
guy who's standing in the bus harassing people, albeit that is bad and wrong in its whole self. But there's no comparison with what Jeffrey Epstein did and that guy did, right? So you can't really, so apples to apples and nahi hota. Neutrality is basically the opposite of what I just said. Neutrality is कि भाई मैं इमरान खान को भी क्रिटिसाइज करूंगा और मैं जो है ना नवाज शरीफ को भी क्रिटिसाइज करूंगा और जो वहां पर सही बात, नो 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 नो, यू कांट डू दैट, यू कांट से कि यार ये मैं इन दोनों को एक ही जाविये में एक ही पॉलिटिकल स्फेयर में चेक करूंगा, बिकॉज देयर इज कंप्लीटली नो सिमिलैरिटीज बिटवीन द टू. इसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हमारी बात हो रही थी ऑन मीडिया कि आई थिंक मीडिया से ही रिलेटेड बेसिकली ये एक तरीके से बायस
Mhm.
एग्जिस्ट करता है, क्योंकि लोगों में तो अपने पॉइंट ऑफ व्यूज तो हैं, यू हैव योर पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, आई हैव माई पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू. न्यूट्रलिटी जहाँ पर जाके उसका सबसे बड़ा इम्पैक्ट होता है कोट एंड कोट न्यूट्रलिटी का, is in the media. When media starts to play neutral when they should be uh, you know, highlighting the point which is much more closer to reality. You can't say, for example, that the election was rigged. Talking about the 2020 US
Mhm.
election, and then also bring in the president of the United States, Joe Biden, on the same show, and then basically say, yeah, both arguments हैं ये दोनों. No, no, you can't. Like, you have to pick a side. Either you are of the point of view कि elections were rigged, and then you come up with your evidence to support that, or
I think it's, yeah, to your point, I think it's fine if you pick a side if you are consistent, right? I think the consistency is key. If you hold everyone to the same standard irrespective of their political stripes, I
Mhm,
get it. Even though I might not agree with that opinion, but I'll respect it. I'll be like, okay,
right.
at least you're not discriminating based on that. I mean, the election one is an interesting point. Uh, my like disclaimer, I don't think it was rigged to the point that it would have overturned the election. I think there's always X's and O's, inconsistencies in every election given the scale of it, but I don't think it was to the extent that it resulted
Like
in,
some
yeah.
like deep state controversy and all of
No,
that.
I
Or
don't.
isn't it?
I don't think. But I think the deep. Things happen. There's a margin of error involved. Whatever. Right.
Or
Fine.
Pakistan may be same. And just sticking with that
Pakistan,
again.
yeah, I mean, I think any democratic society, no country can conduct 100% accurate elections, and that's, I think, built into the system as well, which is the way it is. Any human enterprise has a margin or room for error in it. That's just how
Exactly.
things are.
और ये यही चीज मैंने
But
एक चीज मैं
yes,
तो उसमें ऐड
what I
करूंगा तो तुम
do.
अपनी बात
Okay.
एक चीज ऐड करूंगा तो उसमें बात कंटिन्यू करना फिर अपनी कि इसी बात ये वाली बात ही मैंने उसी एपिसोड में की थी जिसका मैं रेफरेंस कर रहा था जरार खुरो के साथ, वाज कि यार यू टॉक अबाउट दिस लाइक सिलेक्टेड और इलेक्टेड या सिलेक्टेड इमरान खान, जिसको फेमसली लोग बोलते हैं कि आर्मी लेकर आई, ब्ला ब्ला. तो मैं कहता हूँ चलो
Right.
ये एक अलग चीज़ है, बट आर यू किडिंग मी? लाइक आई वाज लिविंग देयर व्हेन द होल इमरान खान बूम वाज हैपनिंग. आई वाजंट नेसेसरली देयर व्हेन द इलेक्शन हैपेंड, बट आई एम नॉट लाइक, अगर मैं किसी अननोन बंदे को उठा के लेकर आऊँ और बोलूँ कि इमरान खान बिकेम प्राइम मिनिस्टर, ही वुडंट बी शॉक्ड, ही वुडंट बी लाइक ओह व्हाट. इट्स नॉट लाइक सेइंग कि व्हाट्स हिज
It's
नेम.
not like हमने like Pete Pagaro का prime minister बनाना
हाँ,
है.
एग्जैक्टली.
It's
तो
not
जिसमें
like
वो
that.
होगा कि यार पीर पगार टू बिकम प्राइम मिनिस्टर, ही नीड्स टू conjure up support from Punjab and Sindh and blah. That is believable for Imran Khan. That means कि reality on the ground existed to support the fact कि Imran Khan can become prime minister. So if the reality on the ground does not really negate what actually happened, then I'm not too worried about कि कहाँ पर कम वोट्स थे और थोड़े ज़्यादा, लाइक थोड़ी सी जो बेजाबदगियाँ वगैरह की तुम जो बात कर रहे थे. बट एनीवे कंटिन्यू.
Right. So I was saying yeah. So just like I said, disclaimer is I don't think that there was enough corruption for or systematic corruption for to overturn the election or whatever, right? But if you look at the reporting on it, that's where थोड़ा सा इंसान के दिमाग खटखटाता है. Like, why is this happening? You start questioning certain set of ideals or opinions or beliefs that people hold. If you recall, after the 2016 election, it wasn't just like word on the street. There were people screaming from the rooftops saying, we need to overturn this. There was the Russian disinformation or bots involved. It's a rigged election. To the point that election के 2 महीने बाद electors from different states meet and then they formally elect or finalize, confirm the president, right?
Right, right.
Before that, I distinctly remember there was this whole video or montage in which Hollywood के सारे stars were on it, and they were telling electors, although you're elected Trump electors, go there and actually say Hillary won the election, stuff like that. If you apply the same standard as today, those people should would have been marginalized and have been labeled as crazy, and rightfully so. So that discrepancy, makes me ask questions like, there an inherent slant in the media, irrespective of whatever happens, there is always going to be some concessions given to one side compared to the other.
Right, but again, वो बिल्कुल ठीक है. That is double clicking into the problem, right? मैं तो
Yeah.
सिर्फ मैं सिर्फ बात करूँ, for example, from an audit perspective, right? When I look at a document, right? When I'm auditing
Hmm.
something,
Hmm.
मैं एक ओवरऑल पर्सपेक्टिव देखता हूँ कि मेरा इस पे क्या ओपिनियन है, विदाउट इवन डिगिंग टू डीप इनटू इट. अगर मेरा ओपिनियन ये है कि यार दिस सीम्स ओके, then I'm going with that understanding कि यार it seems okay, and then if I find something really glaring, until that I'm not going to call it out. ठीक है.
Right.
But if I'm
Right.
going with the perception कि यार this looks shoddy, या ये documentation थोड़ी सी irregular लग रही है, then I'm gonna find things and I'm gonna be able to look for things. Similarly, I think जो मैंने पाकिस्तान का example दी था, that same applies here. The fact that कि a lot of the ballots were going to be mailed in, the fact that there was a lot of mobilization of the left votes, right, towards Joe Biden,
Sure. Sure.
which again nobody can
I don't
tell
think
me.
that he had a lot of enthusiasm going for it, but there was mobilization. Yes.
There was mobilization, yes, more so कि force mobilization
I
is
don't
more
think
क्या.
there was a lot of pro Biden energy. I think there was a
No, it
lot of
was like an
negative.
anti-Trump.
There was a
Yeah.
negative Trump energy. The
Ex-
election was all about Donald Trump,
oh yeah,
pro
yeah,
and con. Biden was just a
absolutely.
bystander, to be honest. He was just
एग्जैक्टली
there.
एग्जैक्टली एग्जैक्टली. लेकिन अगर
Uh,
मैं वो सब चीज़ें ऑन
yeah.
इनटू इनटू कंसिडरेशन लूँ कि द
Mhm.
फैक्ट के मेल इन बैलेट्स हैं, द फैक्ट के बहुत सारे
Right.
आपकी जो वोटिंग परसेंटेज थी ऑन द लेफ्ट साइड इंक्रीज ड्यूरिंग दैट टाइम, लाइक
Sure.
2016 के अंदर पीपल डिडंट कम आउट टू वोट बिकॉज दे थॉट हिलरी इज गोना विन हैंड्स डाउन, एंड दैट्स व्हाई दे
Mhm.
लॉस्ट द इलेक्शन, राइट.
Yep. Yep.
लेकिन हियर देयर वाज मोर, लाइक वी सॉ इन टेक्सास, वी सॉ इन द रेड स्टेट्स कितना क्लोज इलेक्शन हुआ, जहाँ पर हारे भी हैं, ब्लू स्टेट जहाँ पर हारी भी हैं, या डेमोक्रेट्स जहाँ हारे भी हैं, दैट वाज वेरी क्लोज ओवर देयर. तो ऐसा नहीं था कि तो सो आफ्टर दैट फॉर बाइडेन टू कम विक्टोरियस, ओवरऑल पिक्चर में इट मेड सेंस टू मी कि यार
Yeah. I mean, I think if you
अगर
look
वो
at
ऐसा
it
होता ना
on a
कि
whole, yeah.
अगर वो ग्रीन पार्टी, कौन सी पार्टी है वो, अगर वो उसमें से कोई लाइक एनीथिंग अनबिलीवेबल अगर कोई चीज होती है ना, तो फिर मैं कहता है व्हाट्स हैपनिंग, तो फिर मैं डबल क्लिक करता उसमें. यस, बाइडेन विनिंग also may have had some questions, legitimate
Sure.
questions from
Sure. But
each side. वो सब चीजें एग्जिस्ट करती
I'm
हैं,
not
बट
even
ओवरऑल पे
concerned
बात है.
about whether he won it or not. I don't honestly don't care. But what I do find objectionable is the reporting surrounding it, because I think the reason why I find it so pernicious is because not because things people are picking a side, and from the outset I said it's fine to have convictions, it's fine to have beliefs as long as they're consistent. If you think, rightfully so, that people who are calling foul on the elections are wrong, right, and deluded, you should have applied a completely similar standard to 2016, when people like even Nancy Pelosi were saying this election is rigged, it should have been decertified or whatever. Should have called her a complete nut as well. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's important.
That I agree. That I agree. But I think an important point that you mentioned here, and what I actually want to talk to you about is this whole consistency या जो narrative building है मीडिया के अंदर, राइट.
Right.
कि अब जैसे कि हम बात करते हैं कि ये लेफ्ट लीनिंग है एंड ये राइट लीनिंग है, ये
Yeah.
थोड़ा बीच में whatever, ठीक है ना. अब उन लीन्स में मैं जाऊंगा नहीं, मैं सिर्फ समझना चाहता हूँ a few big ticket items in the US. You don't live here, of course, but you have opinions on those items. मैं तुमसे समझना
Hmm.
चाहता हूँ कि एक चीज़ होती है कि कैसे मैं समझाऊँ उसको. एक चीज़ होती है कि मेरी 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 अंडरस्टैंडिंग और मेरा वर्ल्ड व्यू का ओपिनियन क्या है, ठीक है. तुम्हारा वर्ल्ड व्यू का ओपिनियन जो भी होगा किसी भी मैटर को लेकर, अब अगर वो वर्ल्ड व्यू का ओपिनियन एक लेफ्ट लीनिंग चैनल या राइट लीनिंग चैनल या रेडियो या पॉडकास्ट जो भी होगी, वेदर यू एग्री विद दैट पर्सनैलिटी और दैट चैनल और द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन और नॉट, अगर तुम्हारा व्यू वो चीज़ वो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन हाईलाइट करती है एंड ब्लो अप करती है उसे, यू आर नॉट गोइंग टू से कि in the in order to stay unbiased, I'm going to distance myself from that. You're going to be like, okay, yeah, this is the right thing to do. For example, agar koi news organization comes out and says कि rape is wrong, ठीक है, so you're going
Yep,
to get behind that. You're not going to say कि, oh, you're leaning towards anti-rape, what about the guys on the other, like,
right.
you're not going to, you know what I mean, right? तो
Yeah,
अब मैं तुमसे मोटी मोटी चीजें पूछता हूँ. सबसे बड़ा यहाँ पर जो डिस्कशन होती है यूनिवर्सल हेल्थ केयर की होती है, ठीक है, यू लिव इन
right.
अ कंट्री वेयर दैट
Yeah,
एक्चुअली एग्जिस्ट्स.
yeah,
तो
yeah.
अब अगर एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ऑन द लेफ्ट, obviously your NBC, you know, your CNN, Politico, whatever you want to call it, ये सब चीज़ें अगर उस चीज़ को पुश, उस एजेंडा को पुश करती हैं, are you going to say that they're left leaning, then that means they're biased, or are you going to say they're pushing for the right stuff?
I don't think that's a bias. I think that's a belief. It's a political conviction, and like I said, it's fine to have those as long as you're consistent. And I personally believe that universal healthcare is a right. So any body organization honestly and truthfully advocating for it, they're fine. But if they're latching that on to other with other political beliefs, if they're sort of omnibusing it with other a
हाँ, ऑफ
million
कोर्स,
other things,
कि यार ये भी
that's
मानो
different.
और इसराइल भी मानो,
हाँ,
ये नहीं
exactly.
यार.
The healthcare plus of weapons sale to Saudi Arabia. I don't know. I don't
हाँ,
give a shit. No, that's not right.
exactly,
So
that's those two are completely different things. हाँ,
yeah,
I agree. But yeah, तो वो मैं उस चीज़ के बारे में तो समझ आ रहा हूँ कि यार, कि ये जो आता है ना कि यार, अब जैसे मुझे बहुत सारे कमेंट्स मिलते हैं तुम लोगों की तरफ से, अरीब की तरफ से भी कभी बार कि तुम जो लिबरल माइंडेड हो गए हो, या तुम जो ना क्या कहते हैं लेफ्ट लीनिंग हो, CNN देखते हो, whatever जो भी है. अब अगर मेरा ओपिनियन किसी चीज़ को लेकर ये है कि यूनिवर्सल हेल्थ केयर होनी चाहिए, नंबर वन, मैं समझता हूँ कि जो टैक्सेशन है फेयरली डिस्ट्रीब्यूट होनी चाहिए to the top 1%, जिसमें like there's apparent blatant income inequality in the US, जिसमें एक बंदा can afford to go to space because they can afford it, and the others are standing in line
Mhm.
outside the wet, the जो उनके veterans affairs के offices होते हैं, just to get treated for something that they encountered in Iraq or something, right? So there's something clearly wrong in that, right? So if I'm pushing for those two things, for example, if I'm pushing for that and I'm pushing for more accountability on the January 6th issue, right, to make sure कि यार कि हुआ क्या था, who's responsible for that, we know that certain people were fully involved. अब इस चीज को if someone
That's
comes out.
interesting because the January 6th one, I think that's an interesting point here. Is it reminds me of the Mueller probe, And why does it remind me of the Mueller probe? Is because people had already made up their minds on both sides of the spectrum.
हाँ.
कि क्या result है इसका? One side said, Mueller is going to find out whatever that was. He's a Russian asset or whatever, and he's going to be put behind bars. They were so convinced of that it was just a formality for the report to come out and condemn. The other side was so convinced that this guy was a deep state plant or whatever, and he's going to, irrespective of what the actual facts are, he's going to try to malign Donald Trump, right? What came out was a complete dud, right? It was a nothing burger, right?
हाँ.
And I think there's so much polarization where the truth or the facts are relatively mundane still. I think
हम्म.
but the polarization and the sensationalism around it on both sides it's almost sickening because there's too much. I think there's too much news now. There's way too much news.
हाँ, बट जनरली लाइक अगेन मैं डबल क्लिकिंग से गुरेज करते हुए, लाइक जस्ट
Yeah,
टू अंडरस्टैंड कि यार ओवर आर्चिंग व्यू क्या है. यू
right.
डू you do believe के like January 6th was something that was triggered by Donald Trump. It wasn't something like Antifa. You're not like one of those
I don't think
Antifa
there was
or,
there was anyone planted by Antifa or anything like that.
yeah, it wasn't like the conspiracy of the FBI to malign Trump or the malign Trumps. I mean,
But
those
can
were
I can
Trump
I
supporters.
believe that it was a protest that got completely out of hand? People should be persecuted, but at the same time, can I can I also say it's not an insurrection, so to speak, because people are
Yeah, I
just
mean, coming
because
from
people are,
Pakistan,
I think
I
people
think we know what an
insurrection is
insurrection
an
is.
organized effort to overthrow government, not people dressed up in mass and trashing the Capitol building,
Of course, of
right?
course. Though that is
So
just a political
like
wordplay.
we come
Absolutely
from a
agree.
country where which in that area region जहाँ पे हमने insurrections देखी हैं, क्या होता है?
Exactly.
It's not
Whoever's
people
watching,
dressed up
yeah,
with like a Viking costume taking over the
yeah.
Capitol hill,
I
right?
mean,
It's
whoever's
not.
watching, I mean, if anyone should be an expert in insurrections, it should be the two of us because we've
Yeah,
seen one or two in our times in
yeah,
Pakistan.
exactly, yeah,
So,
exactly.
that I agree. But the trigger, obviously, coming from Donald Trump, we were both like I think live watching it when it was happening. When I think Donald Trump tweeted a video as well. कि you're great people, but you should go back. What like पहले उनको बुला रहा था, फिर then उनको वापस
Yeah,
भेजने की कोशिश की
yeah.
थी.
I think what he did was he charged the crowd to an extent that
He
it
incited them.
was almost inevitable that they would actually do something illegal. I think
Exactly, exactly. So
I
it was
think that's
illegal.
my
It
opinion
was
on it.
not.
But it's not a
I don't think.
sensational opinion. That's what I'm saying.
Huh.
It's either he didn't do it, or he's an angel, or he wanted to overthrow the government and hang Mike Pence, right? So
That and
we're,
yeah.
we're in the world of extremes. We live in such extreme, opinionated, polarized, charged worlds that you can't have a centrist opinion without being labeled as neutral, because that again I think is a cop out. But I think reality is a little
Again,
more mundane.
centrist मैं नहीं बोलूंगा. मैं सिर्फ बोलूंगा कि यार जो facts जो मुझे मिले हैं
Just
या
just
तुम्हें
be
मिले हैं,
fact oriented, not
fact oriented. हाँ. If the fact
not
says कि
politically
यार कि
oriented. It's not left or right. I think
exactly.
yeah,
मतलब
he
अगर
has
हमें
some fault in emotionally charging the people. You should never have done that.
एब्सोल्युटली अगर फॉर
But
एग्जांपल हमें आर्गुमेंट या एविडेंस मिलता है कि वेयर फॉर एग्जांपल डोनाल्ड ट्रम्प इज सेइंग कि जनवरी 6 को सब पहुंचो और वहां पर सब लटकाएंगे उसको
तो
लाइक
बाद में
ब्लेटेंटली
तो
सब
Mike Pence को लात मार देंगे. Yeah,
लट
then
रहा
if the
then it's a
evidence is
different
there,
thing,
then
but that's not
you
the
can say
case. That's not the
he's an
case. It's an if
insurrectionist
and but
then.
situation where you're thinking yeah Donald Trump is equal to autocrat is equal to Hitler, then he must
Right.
want to overthrow the no, let's be honest, or I think we sometimes give him too much credit. I think just a couple of days ago, I think Jon Stewart was with Jake Tapper, and Jake Tapper was like talking about Trump or
He's
something.
getting a lot of into a lot of trouble with the left
He is, and he kind of
because of his
called
balance,
them
you
out on
know.
that. He's like, can we just stop talking about Trump? Like
Yeah.
we're just like talking too much about him, and just I think what he really
He got into trouble with that, but I agreed with what he said. But people are like,
absolutely I agree with him 100%. I
but
agree
but
because
that's
he
an interesting thing because 15 years ago, 15 to 16 years ago, during Bush years, John Stewart was the quintessential representation of what the left is, right?
yeah
But the left has moved so far to the left that he seems like a centrist almost. That's an
no yeah
interesting shift in the political spectrum, because I don't think John Stewart's opinions have changed. I think he's
no I
been
don't think
pretty
so either.
consistent.
Very
But
consistent.
the political spectrum has shifted so far left, that he's like someone who is humming and hawing and saying, trying to both sides things, but even though he's not.
She's not.
But that's the criticism thing.
Exactly. I think interesting point that John Stewart also made, which I semi made in that podcast episode that I did prior to the 2020 election results being announced. Actually, that was a night before the election was supposed to happen. When I said why Donald Trump winning was should be good for United States in the long run. तो मैंने उसका नाम ही इसलिए रखा था बिकॉज मैंने ये फील कर लिया था आई थिंक आई टॉक टू यू अबाउट दिस एज वेल मैंने ये फील कर लिया था कि द लेफ्ट इज इज ट्रीटिंग दिस लाइक अ फेरी टेल जिसमें होता है ना कि एक एनिमी होता है एक बैड गाय होता है एक गुड गाय होता है सो देर सिंप्लीफाइंग थिंग्स टू एन एक्सटेंट वेयर
Yeah,
देर लाइक इफ
there's
वी
so many
रिमूव ट्रम्प
binaries there. It's
हाँ
ridiculous.
if we remove Trump then it's the happiest day in the world for us no it changed nothing. Trump is the product of the system that exists in the United States for which you have to continue to work. That's why I was like कि मुझे लगता था कि अगर left, which they actually ended up winning, if they won the election, they would just sit down and say, you know what, we won the election and now we're going to go back to doing whatever they want. I
What have
think
they
the
done so
progress,
far?
exactly the progressive left, which is the Biden, oh, sorry, the Bernie camp, they understand this pretty well. They're like, no, 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 the work continues. The work continues. The likes of your जो कौन है वो टेक्सास में जो बंदी है जो बहुत देने के जिसने क्या कहते मोबिलाइज किया था फॉर
Texas?
टेक्सास में भी थी सॉरी नॉट नॉन टेक्सास आई थिंक वन ऑफ द रेड
I
स्टेट आई
think, I
थिंक
think it was in Georgia.
I think it was Georgia. Yeah, yeah. कौन सी बंदी थी यार वो जो बहुत उसको like she pushed it and she
Stacey
actually ended.
Abrams. Stacey
I think
Abrams.
Stacey Abrams. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Stacey. So people like them, they know okay, the work starts now. They people like the progressive people on the left. They know कि the अभी जो Biden president बना है, the work starts now actually to implement the changes that they want to see in the country to make sure कि जो मसले इस सिस्टम में एग्जिस्ट करते हैं उनको खत्म करें. That's why I was pro Trump winning because I would मेरा ओपिनियन ये था कि अगर ट्रम्प जीतेगा तो that's gonna hit them in the head to an extent where they'll start going to will they'll when they'll start to realize that this is a bigger deeper problem,
Right.
and that's exactly what John
But
Stewart was
on that
mentioning.
note, let me tell you one thing that I'm grateful for when it comes to Donald Trump. I'll tell you one thing,
Ah,
and it's not like a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. I'm genuinely grateful because his ascension and his presidency has brought into sharp relief why ये जो होता है ना politically हमें decency दिखानी चाहिए and all that that is so widely overrated and that
mhm.
what triggered me was the recent death of Colin Powell, right?
Yeah,
That guy is easily responsible for like a million people's death in Iraq for completely no reason.
yeah,
Pointless, right? Pointless. I remember him presenting his case at was it the United Nations, and he
yep,
was so
yep,
convincing. It was like
yep.
an MBA
Famously.
presentation, right? And there are people out there who are trying to be like, he was a great patriot, or we should honor him. No, man, no. Why should we honor war criminals? I think we are, at least because of him, we have that has been moved out of the mainstream that you have to celebrate people when they die irrespective of what they did, right?
Exactly.
And I cannot there is nothing good I can say about Colin Powell. There is nothing good I can say about George W. Bush when he passes away or whatever that happened. There's nothing good I can say about Tony Blair. There's nothing good I can
यार
say
वो
about
कौन था
all
भी
those
recently
generals.
who passed away? I think it was it George Bush the dad who passed away or someone else जिसके
Was
ऊपर
Dick Cheney? Was it?
I think Dick Cheney passed away, right?
Dick Cheney passed away too. Like
Is he
just
dead?
basically, like, I don't. Maybe he's alive, but it was one of those people in that administration. Donald
Yeah,
Rumsfeld.
yeah.
I think it was Rumsfeld.
Oh yeah, Rumsfeld. There you go.
Secretary of
हाँ.
Defense at that time. Again, a war criminal. I don't have. Why should we have decency for him?
एग्जैक्टली आई थिंक उस पे मेहदी हसन ने पीस किया था जिसमें से बोला था कि क्या आई डोंट अंडरस्टैंड कि जो ये अमेरिकन मीडिया है दे जंप टू लाइक whitewash their history, and then the
No,
moment you
no.
start talking about their actual achievements, like quote unquote achievements, they're saying yeah disrespectful or like respect the dead. He's he was like, I mean, are you ridiculous? I mean,
Like
there's
I
some
remember on
ridiculous.
9/11, George Bush came out and said something anti-Trump, and the left was like, this guy is the best. He is so decent. That's how a president should be. No, man. Like that,
No,
that guy is a war criminal. I don't give a
exactly.
shit about what he said about Donald Trump. That guy is, for all intents and purposes, like way worse than anything Donald Trump has done.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And we grew
100%.
up in the generation, just ki wajah se, it completely fucked up South Asia because of that guy.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to listen to people say, people should be more like, Cheneys or Bushes because those people, it's a good thing that we don't need to have any decency about people after they've died if they've been involved in war crimes, like literal war crimes.
अच्छा
So
मैं इसमें इसमें मैं तुम्हें एक डेविल्स एडवोकेट प्ले करता हूँ क्योंकि इट्स अ सिमिलर थिंग, नॉट अ सिमिलर थिंग बट अ थीम हुई
mhm,
है. Recently Umar Sharif passed away, right? May God bless his soul. We were both his
big
fans
fans,
growing
yes,
up. We love him to bits, like living in Karachi
we
and
do,
growing up in
yeah,
Karachi.
absolutely, 100%.
Unbelievable person. तो मैंने उस पे देखा था कि people were starting to bring up some of his quote unquote questionable jokes from the past in the 90s where he was apparently, according to them, anti women or whatever, like
Right, right.
uh,
Fat phobic, they're like all
yeah,
sorts
yeah.
of stuff.
तो उस वक्त लोगों ने कहा था कि क्या come on, like the guy's passed away, let's just celebrate him for what he did and let's just not dig into his like
Mhm.
catalog of quote like actually jokes. It was not like his उसका कोई आर्टिकल नहीं था कि जिसमें उसने अपनी व्यूज बताए थे. It was they were jokes, right? So where do you stand on that? Do you feel like that falls in the same category of what you just
No, no,
described?
absolutely not. Because one thing is a joke, and I understand, a joke can be hurtful. It can can create friction within communities and stuff like that. I get that, but it's not the same as being in Iraq and killing 100 million people for no reason, right?
Yeah,
There's like levels to this. That which is why again, uh, a lot of times when people sort of e- equated Donald Trump or the Republican Party with the Nazis, I found that to be so crazy and
yeah,
out of its mind because then you're sort of diminishing what people in Germany and Austria and Europe went through around that time. But again, my point is there are things that are black and white. Like
hmm,
the Iraq war was wrong, the Afghanistan war was wrong. America is policing the world. That policy that continues to this day, that's wrong.
hmm,
Uh, was Umarsharif wrong or problematic? Yeah, sure he was, of course, because he is a human being, he's flawed, right? Like you or I. I mean, we have
yeah,
probably said things in the past that we're not proud of, but that doesn't mean when I pass away or someone else passes away, you can't eulogize them, right? You
hmm,
can because you look at the net of a person's achievement. Was he a net good or was he a net bad? I would argue Nawaz Sharif was a net good. George Bush, Dick Cheney, or Donald Rumsfeld, or Colin Powell. No, net good what? Did they build a presidential library or what? Nothing. They're completely worthless people in my mind
yeah, yeah,
because of the sum of their deeds, I think. But that doesn't mean I whitewash everything Umar Sharif said because honestly, I was thinking about this because I remember जब हम चोली में नहीं रहते थे मैंने
हाँ
देखी थी उसकी स्टैंड अप उस जमाने में शायद कोई इंडियन जो कहते हैं इंडियन अवार्ड सेरेमनी पे वो कुछ स्टैंड अप कर रहा
हाँ, जी
था
टीवी वगैरह, जी
जी
शो
टीवी
पे।
वगैरह पे कर रहा था और उसमें उसने अदनान समी की इतनी ली एंड आई रिमेंबर लाफिंग एट इट दैट टाइम बट इफ आई
हाँ,
लुक
I
एट
know.
इट आई लाइक दिस इज लाइक उसकी जिद जो है एलिवेटर वाली कंपनी बनाती है लाइक स्टफ like it was at that time I found it मुझे तो बड़ी हंसी आ रही थी so I was like wow
हाँ,
yeah but nothing clicked inside me saying you know what this is not right man but
that's
if I look
fashion
at
bed
it now
shaming,
man
yeah.
that's just like that's like a guy who's going through a lot of issues with regards to body image and health, and you're piling on. No wonder he was like "fuck Pakistan" later,
Hmm.
but like usko power se biryani khilate hain log, stuff like that, right? And he made a lot of jokes like that, got a lot of laughs. But I am glad that those kinds of jokes have aged poorly because there's a lot of comedy to be done without him, right? But that
Yeah, but
doesn't
I
mean
think
I don't love or appreciate Omar Sharif as a whole. I think he's a legend, and he's one of the funniest people who has actually stepped foot in the subcontinent. So
yeah,
you can
absolutely.
have a
I
complicated legacy. You can still celebrate someone. I think.
Yeah, yeah, I get your point. I think मैं सिर्फ इसलिए रख रहा था आगे क्योंकि there is some parallels that sometimes people draw when they quote unquote celebrate the likes of Powell or Rumsfeld, and then the
Hmm.
same people when they start eulogizing Umar Sharif, they're like, oh यार तुम्हारे standards change हो गए, अभी तुम कह रहे थे कि यार इसकी history देखो और उसको देखो, फिर then now you're trying to whitewash the comedian's history again. लेकिन मेरा उसमें भी ये भी एक point of view, I do agree that jokes can be hurtful and they've had issues and all of that. But at the end of the day, they're jokes. ठीक है?
They are jokes. Yeah.
They are jokes. He's there on
Like,
the
I
stage to make
personally have
people laugh.
never been offended with a joke that I've heard on TV, even if it was targeted at me by Bill Maher, for example, right? That guy
Yeah,
makes jokes at the expense of Muslims or brown people all the time. I
all the
honestly
time.
was like, okay, I don't like the joke. I don't really care for it. I'm not gonna get offended by it and go out on the street and protest against it or outside the offices of wherever his show is held. So I think people place too much stock in weight that's carried in jokes because it's a joke, man. I mean, that's I agree with you there.
तो अभी
But
जैसे recently
there's
controversy चल रही Dave Chappelle क्या, have you been
Dave Chappelle wale mein,
reading that?
yes, yeah,
Have you been reading
yeah,
that?
yeah. I am surprised that it has gained some. I actually listened to some of those jokes. They did not
I'm yet
seem
to watch the
overly.
special actually. I want to watch the
I,
special.
I didn't think the special was that funny, but that was funny. It was funny, but I didn't. My takeaway wasn't like, oh my god, this is so offensive. एंड द थिंग आजकल के वक्त में हमारी सेंसेस इतनी हाइटेंड हुई है ना हर ऑफेंसिव चीज से कि अगर हम कोई चीज सुने और उसमें थोड़ा सा भी हमें दिमाग में अगर थोड़े से भी ऑफ कुछ लग रहा हो ना तो हमारे दिमाग में शुबा पैदा हो जाता है कि यार ये थोड़ा सा ऑफेंसिव हो सकता है बट विद हिम आई डिड नॉट थिंक इट वाज दैट एजी और दैट ऑफेंसिव सो आई वाज सरप्राइज्ड मैन आई एम जस्ट
Where
आई
do you
डोंट नो
stand on that? I see a lot of Muslims actually जो मेरे group में like people who I have on Facebook, they're pro Chappelle because apparently because Chappelle obviously hit on the group that they're not too fond of.
Yep.
Um, but I was thinking, what if the shoe was on the other foot? What if Chappelle had joked about Muslims like brutally? Would
He is
would
a
you
Muslim,
still?
so
Yeah, yeah, I know, but yeah, what
yeah.
if he'd done that? He's a Muslim, yeah, so that's one more reason for them to support him. But what if he had made jokes about that? So, would I have that the same feeling that I have right now, where I'd be like, "It's a joke, man, move on."
Yeah, it's
Maybe,
like, it's like those caricatures, right?
हाँ,
That,
या वो जो कौन है वो
It
बंदा?
weren't jokes. it was it was
अहमद
designed to
वो जो है,
provoke, but
जो पपेट लेके जो आता है, वो वाला बंदा ना?
नहीं, वो जो यार वो डेनिश पेपर में यूलियन पोस्टन में जो आए थे ब्लास्फेमस
हाँ,
कैरिकेचर
हाँ,
सेट
हाँ,
द
हाँ।
वर्ल्ड ऑन
That those
फायर
are not
आफ्टर
jokes. Those are not jokes.
those weren't jokes. Or क्या नाम था उसका, Charlie Hebdo and all that.
Charlie Hebdo, yeah.
Those weren't jokes. That was maliciously designed to provoke
हाँ,
people.
provoke
It
people,
was
yeah.
just that. It was like, putting sacred persons or people who view that person sacred to on a dog and stuff like that. That's not a joke.
Yeah,
That is designed to provoke. And at the same time, I still wouldn't burn down buildings for it, honestly. But if someone asks me if I support that person's right to, I don't know, man. I just, there are limits to the things, but and that might not be compatible with the mainstream view. But I mean, what the Dave Chappelle story makes me think is, how आप जो है अपना जाविया बदल देते हैं based on the situation,
right.
and I, as much as I don't like to invoke race in it, but I see a lot of white people do this, right?
Yeah,
When it's about Black Lives Matter, for example, it becomes about a marginalized uh, race, right?
right.
But when it comes to, for example, trans right, they ignore the fact that the person they're going against is a marginalized race and also part of a marginalized religion, right, or as
Mhm.
well. So that their view of things or their point of attack changes completely. So it's almost like, a certain community just uses people depending on the situation. And this getting offended epidemic is just getting out of hand now. I mean, why do people have so much real estate in their head that they find everything offensive and they analyze things specifically to that filter? Okay, let's see if this offends me or not. So,
Yeah, मैं इस पे एक अलग से पॉडकास्ट करूँगा तुम्हारे साथ. I'm glad that we've talked about this. I don't know, मैं एक चुगली छोड़ूंगा उसमें. I don't know if you've been following, but Twitter is guilty of this the most, where they get offended by every fucking thing. Abhi
yeah,
recently, Rohit Hayat made some tweets like about poor people or whatever, right? I mean, now people are piling on him, and like there's everyone is looking to point
people have
score.
like a lot of time and room to
Like
be offended
इतना
by
pile
everything.
on कर रहे हैं. They're like वो just अब्रारुलक वाला हुआ था, Baby Shark वाला. Now they're starting to pile up. They were piling up on him. I was like, come on. I mean, just
Just a
give
man's
someone a
opinion.
break. Give,
You
like
get
he just said कि Baby Shark. अच्छा, इनकी ओवर इंटेलेक्चुअलाइजेशन की हद देखो आप. उसने एक स्पीच में बोला उसने कि यार हमारे ज़माने में माएँ जो है कलमा सुना के सुना लेती थी बच्चों को, व्हाटएवर, जो भी उसने एक पुराने ज़माने की बात की, इस तरह सुला देती थी, मेरा बच्चा सो जा, व्हाटएवर, या पहला कलमा था ये, व्हाटएवर. और आज की माएँ यानी कि वो बेबी शार्क बढ़ा जाती हैं और बेबी शार्क ये वो, ठीक है ना? अब उसको इंटेलेक्चुअलाइज़ कैसे किया लेफ्ट, सो कॉल्ड लेफ्ट इन पाकिस्तान, कह रहे हैं कि जितनी भी प्रॉब्लम्स हैं ना इस वक़्त पाकिस्तान में, वो उसी जनरेशन की हैं. इसका मतलब है कि जो उनकी माँओं ने उनको सिखाया था या जो पढ़ाया था, उसका कोई
that
फ़र्क नहीं हुआ.
contributed towards it. उसकी वजह से
हाँ,
उसका
आई
भी,
मीन
वो भी इसमें हिस्सेदार
आई वाज़ लाइक,
हैं.
आर यू फकिंग किडिंग मी? आर यू किडिंग मी? लाइक सीरियसली इस लेवल पे जाके इंटेलेक्चुअलाइज़ कर रहे हैं हर चीज़ को कि अब बस अब मुझे ऑफेंड होना है तो अब मैं उसको ज़रा उसको मैं उसकी तावीलें निकालूँ कि यार अच्छा इसका मतलब ये है, इसका मतलब लाइक आई मीन जस्ट गिव समवन अ ब्रेक. He, they said something, move on, whatever. Let the guy make a comment for once, and just you make your own opinion and live with it, whatever. Like इतना एक जो एक वो है ना कैंसरस ये चीज़ आ चुकी है कि यार I have to react to everything. I have to be offended by everything. It's just like you said, getting out of hand. So yeah, it was a great discussion again. Then I think I really appreciate your time. I think what we wanted to really touch upon, I think उसको अगर summarize हम लोग ऐसे करें कि यार it's okay to have a political opinion. It's okay to have some sort of a conviction, as you said very
Yeah,
rightly. But it's also it's like अगर मैं इसको summarize करूँ तो I would just say that it's a very complicated world.
there
Everything
is.
is it's complicated, so you can't like अगर मैं बोलूँ कि डोनाल्ड रम्सफेल्ड को हम क्रिटिसाइज कर सकते हैं बेस्ड ऑन हिज past and history, despite the fact that he passed away on the day whatever, doesn't mean कि वो that rules blindly applies to Umar Sharif as well, right? So there's
Yeah,
complication, there's layers, there's nuances that you have to really take into consideration before speaking. That's why हमारे यहाँ भी ये बोली जाती है कि भाई जो बोल रहे हो जरा सोच समझ के बोलो. ऐसा
हाँ,
नहीं कि मुंह
एब्सोल्यूट्स में
जो है.
बोलना जो है और एक्सट्रीम्स में बोलना जो है, अगर उससे हम गुरेज करें, इसका ना एक्चुअली result in a lot of intellectual development, because then you're
Yep.
actually looking at weighing things. I don't like this person, but maybe he's making a good point, or I really like this person, but I don't think that person's right on this point. To be able
Exactly.
to distinguish or be able to critically analyze people who you may dislike or you may idolize, I think it's important.
Yep, I agree. I think थोड़ा सा इसके अंदर यही कंक्लूजन निकलता है कि इट्स कॉम्प्लिकेटेड. एवरी मैटर शुड बी जज्ड ऑन इट्स ओन मेरिट्स. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि मैं एक रूल यहाँ पर आपको गोल्डन रूल बता दूं एंड देन यू गो ऑन एंड अप्लाई दैट टू एवरीथिंग. इट जस्ट
Right.
डिपेंड्स ऑन सो मेनी नुआंसेस कि यार डेव शपेल वाला सिचुएशन अलग है, उमर शरीफ वाले कंप्लीटली डिफरेंट है. Your Donald
Colin Powell
Rumsfeld
ki
and the
alag
George
hai,
Bush and Colin Powell, all of that is different. Your
Yeah.
January 6th incident, is different. Hitler is different. Trump is different.
Yes,
You
yes,
know,
exactly.
इतनी सारी nuances हैं इसके अंदर, fascism and all of that. ये जो extremes में और absolutes में बात होती है कि this guy is a fascist, this guy is a communist, and this guy is that, and I mean it's so
Exactly.
ridiculous.
It is. It
थोड़ा
is.
सा
It's
थोड़ा सा उसमें
absurd. It's
बात की.
outrageous.
हाँ, exactly. And जो I think one thing that we definitely agree on is there's no such thing as neutrality, right? Neutrality is if you don't have an opinion, and if genuinely because you don't know, that's why you don't have an opinion, then that's what probably neutrality is. कि आपको नहीं पता. But
Yeah.
if आपको पता है और आपके पास opinion है and then you stay quiet because you want to be neutral, then you're not being neutral, you're just being an asshole, in my opinion.
You're being very disingenuous, right? Because
हाँ, एग्जैक्टली, स्पेशली व्हेन
you're
यू आर इन द
you're
पावर इन व्हेन यू आर इन द पोजीशन, लाइक अगर मोरल क्राइसिस होती हैं, जिस जिस तरह से आई थिंक ये कोड भी एग्जिस्ट करता है कि इन टाइम्स ऑफ मोरल crisis, neutrality basically adds on to that. If you're neutral in times of moral crisis,
then you are basically tolerating it, right? If you're
you're
neutral.
tolerating, you're siding
Yeah.
with the oppressor, not the oppressed, right? तो
Yep.
वो situations completely different है. But if you genuinely don't know, then learn about it कि यार ऐसा क्यों है, ऐसा क्या है, opinions कौन कौन से हैं, before you speak. So yeah, that's how I
Yeah,
would
that's a
summarize
good
it.
summary.
Anything else you want to add?
No, I think, but we should talk more about some of the things that we were exploring in the later half of
uh,
our discussion, maybe for a different pod.
I wanna talk about Umar Sharif. I think let's have an episode on Umar Sharif, the man and the legend,
Yeah, and
and then
actually, I think it's the ISI chief standoff is a very interesting microcosm of how we perceive or think in Pakistan on society and power
हाँ,
dynamics and stuff like that. It's an interesting
exactly.
case because um, depending on who you ask, people have a completely different take or opinion on it, and it's so funny because I view it so differently. But it's an
Yeah.
interesting case study too.
Absolutely, I agree. All right.
All
Appreciate
right,
your time, Zen. I think this was a good discussion. We'll be back with another one to continue this particular aspect that we've discovered in this discussion. So
all
yeah,
right.
appreciate
Till
it, man.
next time.
Thank you.